You accidentally graze a sharp thorn while walking through the dense brush. A tiny scratch on your finger begins to bleed. It stings a little, but you do not care, and you keep walking. There is no antiseptic solution, no bandage, and not a single antibiotic pill in your pocket. For the vast majority of Homo sapiens history, an accidental scratch like this was not a minor inconvenience. It was a direct wager with death. Before the age of modern medicine began, wound infections were one of the leading causes of death, where invisible bacteria could bring down even the strongest hunter in just a few days. Compare that with reality today. The World Health Organization estimates that the mortality rate from common skin infections caused by minor cuts has dropped below 0.1% thanks to the arrival of antibiotics. So before the world had colorful pills, how did your ancestors survive these invisible enemies? Have you ever wondered how your bloodline managed to remain unbroken? When there was once a time when a single wooden splinter could have been enough to erase an entire generation, the answer lies in a miraculous defense system refined through millions of years of evolution. When your body is attacked by bacteria or viruses, the first response does not come from anything outside you. It comes from within. Your brain receives a danger signal and immediately raises your body temperature. A fever begins. You feel hot, uncomfortable, and shaky. But did you know that at that moment, the fever was your most advanced weapon? Higher temperature slows down the reproduction of pathogens while activating your white blood cells to work at maximum capacity. You lose your appetite and only want to lie still. This is not weakness. It is an intelligent biological strategy. By refusing food, your body is reducing the supply of iron and nutrients in the bloodstream, things bacteria desperately need in order to grow. Lying still helps you conserve every last drop of precious energy, so your body can pour everything into the life or death battle happening at the cellular level. Do you think exhaustion is a sign of weakness? No. That is the moment when your body is redirecting all of its resources to the inner battlefield in order to protect your life. However, the natural immune system was sometimes not enough against serious infected wounds or bone-deep pain. That was when your intelligence began to speak. Your ancestors did not have modern laboratories, but they possessed the greatest laboratory of all. The wild, natural world. You learned to observe the world around you with a sharp instinct that modern humans have long forgotten. You saw an injured bear chewing on a particular root, or an ancient ape eating bitter leaves when its stomach was infected with parasites. Modern science calls this behavior zoopharmacognosy, the ability of animals to treat themselves using plants. From those careful observations, you experimented, remembered, and passed the knowledge down to the next generation. You began to understand that every leaf, every blade of grass, and every piece of fungus growing on an old tree trunk could be the fragile boundary between life and death. You turned the forest into your own giant medicine cabinet. To understand how powerful this medicine cabinet could be, let us travel back in time to a famous archaeological site in Spain called El Sidrón. There, in 2017, scientists analyzed the calcified dental plaque on the teeth of a Neanderthal skeleton more than 48,000 years old. The DNA results shocked the scientific world. This individual had a severe dental abscess that caused extreme pain. At the same time, his digestive system contained an intestinal parasite that could cause serious diarrhea. The plaque on his teeth showed that this Neanderthal had been chewing willow bark. Do you know what willow bark contains? It contains salicylic acid, the core active ingredient used to produce the aspirin painkillers you still take today. But what is even more astonishing is that researchers also found traces of the saprophytic fungus Penicillium naljavensi on his teeth. This is a type of fungus capable of producing penicillin, the first antibiotic substance known to humanity. This ancient man was not only trying to reduce his pain, he was treating an infection with a natural antibiotic tens of thousands of years before Alexander Fleming officially discovered penicillin in a laboratory. Do you still think they were just primitive, foolish creatures surviving by luck? Now let us continue the journey to a frozen region of the Alps, where a natural mummy named Ötzi was discovered after 5,300 years buried in ice and snow. When archaeologists examined the perfectly preserved personal belongings of Ötzi the Iceman, they found 2 pieces of birch polypore fungus, scientifically known as Piptoporus betulinus, carefully threaded onto leather straps. When doctors examined the contents of Ötzi's stomach, they discovered that he was infected with a parasitic worm called whipworm, which could cause severe abdominal pain. Amazingly, the birch fungus Ötzi carried with him contains a chemical called agaric acid, a compound with strong laxative effects and the ability to fight intestinal parasites. Ötzi was not carrying those two pieces of fungus as meaningless decoration. He carried them as a pocket-sized medical kit, a dose of medicine designed precisely to treat the chronic illness inside his body. Can you imagine Ötzi walking across high mountain peaks, enduring the skin-cutting cold, yet still maintaining control over his health thanks to a deep understanding of wild forest fungi? But ancient medicine did not stop with isolated personal remedies. Survival in prehistoric times was a collective game, and the strongest weapon of humankind was never sharp claws or bulging muscles. It was empathy and compassion. Imagine you are chasing an antelope during a hunt. You slip and fall down a small cliff. The cracking sound of breaking bone echoes through the air. You look down and see that your shin bone has snapped, piercing through flesh, with blood pouring out. In the natural world, a broken leg for a predator or prey animal usually means an immediate death sentence. You can no longer run away. You can no longer find food. Soon, you will become an easy meal for other predators. But for humans, the story takes a completely different turn. At Shanidar Cave in the mountains of Iraq, anthropologist Ralph Solecki excavated Neanderthal skeletons dating back around 60,000 years. One of the most famous skeletons, labeled Shanidar IV, told us a deeply moving story about prehistoric medicine. When experts analyzed soil samples around this skeleton, they found a large concentration of pollen from at least 7 different medicinal plants, including yarrow, thistle, and cornflower. These were not random flowers that had blown into the cave by accident. They may have been intentionally gathered for burial with the dead or used as a medicinal bedding while the person was still alive. The skeleton of another individual found at the site showed that he had suffered severe head trauma, leading to blindness in one eye, paralysis in one arm, and a broken leg from a young age. And yet, he survived for decades after those horrifying injuries. How could a disabled person survive in such a brutal wild world without care, feeding, and protection from his companions? Someone crushed medicinal herbs and placed them on his wounds. Someone brought him food and water. Someone guarded the fire day and night to keep predators away while he lay unable to move. The strongest medicine of ancient humans was not one specific plant. It was love, care, and the bond of the community. So now let us recreate one day in your life as a healer, a shaman, or an elder in an ancient tribe. Your work does not begin with writing prescriptions. It begins with silent steps into the deep forest just as dawn breaks. You bend close to the damp ground, touching each leaf with your fingers to feel its moisture and smell its scent. You know that yarrow must be gathered while the morning dew has not yet disappeared, so it can keep its strongest blood-stopping properties. When a child in the tribe falls and scrapes their skin, you take the yarrow leaves, crush them in your palm to release their antibacterial compounds, and gently place them over the child's bleeding wound. When a hunter returns with a fever and violent chills, you build a small fire and place eucalyptus leaves or aromatic bark into the flames, allowing him to breathe in the warm smoke to open his airways and soothe his headache. You do not only treat the body, you treat the spirit as well, with whispered chants and rituals around the fire, awakening the inner strength hidden deep inside each person. Can you feel the warmth of the fire and the sharp scent of herbs surrounding the cave in the darkness? And yet human history is full of surprising and counterintuitive turning points. We often assume that when humans abandoned the hunter-gatherer lifestyle and entered the agricultural revolution, settling down, farming crops, and raising animals, our lives became safer and healthier. But the truth was the complete opposite. Agriculture was, in many ways, a massive biological trap for human health. When you wandered through forests, population density was low, and constant movement helped you stay away from toxic waste and accumulated pathogens. Your diet was extremely diverse, filled with hundreds of kinds of roots, vegetables, berries, and nutrient-rich wild meats. But when you began to settle in one place, you had to live alongside your own waste. Your diet narrowed dramatically, revolving around only a few staple crops such as wheat, rice, or corn. This led to serious malnutrition and a weakened immune system, clearly visible in the marks left on the tooth enamel of skeletons from this period. More importantly, the domestication of animals and living under the same roof with livestock and poultry created a medical disaster unlike anything before. Did you know that some of the deadliest diseases in human history originated from domesticated or closely associated animals? Smallpox is believed to have emerged from viruses connected to animals. Tuberculosis spread to humans through close contact with cattle. Influenza came from birds and pigs. When humans stood close to animals and breathed the same air inside crowded villages, viruses and bacteria mutated, adapted, and learned how to attack the human body. Terrifying epidemics began to erupt, wiping out entire villages within weeks. Ancient humans suddenly faced invisible enemies that traditional herbs could no longer defeat. It was settled life and the rise of modern civilization that became the source of mass-killing diseases, not the wild prehistoric world itself. Now look back at your own life through the mirror of history. Every time you feel a mild fever beginning inside your body, every time you reach for a cold pill on the shelf, or every time you use a piece of medical gauze to cover a wound, you are inheriting the results of a survival battle that lasted hundreds of thousands of years. The white blood cells flowing through your veins today are the descendants of cells that once defeated ancient parasites in the rainforests of the Ice Age. Our understanding of medicine did not suddenly appear in sterile laboratories. It was written in blood, in failed experiments, and in the biological memory of thousands of generations of ancestors who came before us. You are not a creature separated from the past. You are a living museum of evolution. You lie there in your modern room listening to the sound of traffic outside the window. Your forehead may feel slightly warm from a mild illness, but you know you are completely safe. You open your eyes in a peaceful space, with no threats from wild animals and no freezing wind howling through the cracks of a dark cave. You reach for the cup of warm water beside your bed, feeling comfort as your body begins to heal itself. No pharmacy, no antibiotics, no doctor, and no way to call for help. That was once the reality of your ancestors. But now you live in an age where every breath you take is protected by the legacy of one of the greatest stories of survival in the history of this planet.